He was born a prince. He served his country in war. He walked alongside queens and presidents. And then, in what seemed like an instant, it all came crashing down. Prince Andrew's fall from grace isn't just a royal scandal. It's a turning point for one of the world's oldest institutions. It's a story about accountability, power, and whether anyone is truly above consequence. By the end of this video, you'll understand how one prince's choices have forced the entire monarchy to reckon with its place in the modern world. And you'll see why this matters for all of us, whether we care about royalty or not. To understand where we are, we need to understand where Prince Andrew came from. Born in 1960, Andrew was the Queen's third child and second son. Unlike Charles, who was burdened with being the heir, Andrew had a different role. He could be the fun one, the action hero, the charismatic spare. And for a while, that's exactly what he was. In 1982, at 22 years old, he served as a helicopter pilot in the Falklands War. He flew dangerous missions. He was, by all accounts, brave. The British press called him Randy Andy and the Playboy Prince, but there was genuine respect for his military service. He married Sarah Ferguson in 1986. They had 2 daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie. The marriage didn't last, but they remained close. A modern, amicable divorce that seemed progressive for the royals. For decades, Andrew lived the life of a working royal. He did trade envoy work, attended events, cut ribbons. He wasn't the star, but he was part of the family business. And then came his association with Jeffrey Epstein. And everything changed. Before we go further, if you want to understand the forces reshaping institutions around the world, hit that subscribe button. We're going to unpack not just what happened, but why it matters. Jeffrey Epstein was a financier who cultivated relationships with powerful people, politicians, scientists, businessmen, and yes, royalty. In 2008, he was convicted of soliciting prostitution from a minor in Florida. He served 13 months. Prince Andrew met Epstein in the 1990s, reportedly through Ghislaine Maxwell, a British socialite. Even after Epstein's 2008 conviction, Andrew maintained contact with him. In 2010, 2 years after Epstein's conviction, Andrew was photographed walking with Epstein in New York Central Park. That image raised questions. Why would a member of the British royal family be spending time with a convicted sex offender? Andrew's defense was that he was there to break off the friendship in person. But the optics were damaging. Then, in 2019, Epstein was arrested on federal charges of sex trafficking of minors. Before he could stand trial, he died in his jail cell in what was ruled as suicide. But the allegations didn't die with him. Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's accusers, alleged that she had been trafficked to Prince Andrew when she was 17. She said she was forced to have sexual encounters with him on 3 occasions, in London, New York, and on Epstein's private island. There was a photograph, Andrew with his arm around Giuffre's waist, with Ghislaine Maxwell in the background. Andrew would later question the authenticity of this photo. Let me be clear about the facts. Prince Andrew has consistently denied these allegations. He was never criminally charged. In 2022, he settled a civil lawsuit with Giuffre out of court for a reported sum, while not admitting guilt. But the damage was done, not just to Andrew, but to the institution he represented. If there was a single moment that sealed Andrew's fate, it was November 16, 2019. That's when Andrew sat down with BBC journalist Emily Maitlis for what he thought would be an opportunity to clear his name. Instead, it became one of the most catastrophic interviews in modern royal history. Let me walk you through why it was so damaging. First, the lack of empathy. When asked about the allegations, Andrew showed virtually no sympathy for Epstein's victims. He didn't express horror at what had happened to young women. He focused on defending himself. Second, the bizarre details. Andrew claimed he couldn't have been at a nightclub with Giuffre on the night she alleged because he was at a Pizza Express in Woking with his daughter. He said he couldn't have been sweating in the nightclub, as Giuffre described, because a medical condition from the Falklands War meant he didn't sweat at the time. These oddly specific denials didn't read as exonerating. They read as strange and out of touch. Third, the tone. Andrew seemed more concerned about his reputation than about the serious allegations of abuse. He described staying at Epstein's home as convenient. He said his friendship with Epstein had some seriously beneficial outcomes in terms of connections. The public reaction was swift and brutal. This wasn't a prince defending himself with dignity. This was someone who seemed fundamentally disconnected from why people were outraged. Within days, Andrew announced he was stepping back from royal duties. Major charities and organizations began cutting ties with him. His military titles and royal patronages were in jeopardy. The interview that was supposed to save him instead buried him. Now here's where this becomes bigger than just one person. Because the monarchy had to make a choice. Queen Elizabeth II, Andrew's mother, reportedly had deep affection for her second son. She was said to be protective of him. But she was also the monarch, and the institution came first. In January 2022, Buckingham Palace announced that Andrew's military affiliations and royal patronages were being returned to the Queen. He would no longer use the title His Royal Highness in any official capacity. He was, for all practical purposes, exiled from royal life. Think about how extraordinary that is. This is an institution built on hierarchy, birthright, and family loyalty. And yet, they cut off one of their own. Why? Because they had to. The monarchy was facing an existential question. Can an institution built on hereditary privilege survive in an era demanding accountability? The younger generation, people in their 20s and 30s, are increasingly skeptical of the monarchy. They see it as outdated, expensive, and undemocratic. Polls show declining support, especially among young people. Andrew's scandal became a litmus test. Would the royals protect one of their own, or would they show that even princes face consequences? By stepping back, the institution was trying to prove it could adapt, that it understood modern values of accountability, that no one, not even a prince, was above scrutiny. But was it enough? That's the question the monarchy is still grappling with. King Charles, now on the throne, has been clear. This is meant to be a slimmed-down, modern monarchy. Andrew doesn't fit that vision. He's been sidelined from official events, though he still appeared at some family occasions like the Queen's funeral and King Charles's coronation, because family is family, even when it's complicated. Let's zoom out and talk about what this story really teaches us, because it's about more than royalty. This is about power and accountability in the 21st century. For centuries, powerful people, whether royalty, celebrities, politicians, or executives, operated with impunity. The rules didn't apply to them the same way they applied to everyone else. But something has shifted in our culture. The #MeToo movement, increased transparency through social media, a generation that demands accountability. All of this has changed the game. Andrew's case is part of a broader reckoning. Harvey Weinstein went to prison. Bill Cosby faced legal consequences. Politicians have resigned over scandals that would have been buried a generation ago. The question is, are these real changes, or are they just symbolic? Is Andrew actually being held accountable, or is he just being hidden away until the heat dies down? He settled the civil suit, but he paid no criminal penalty. He lost his titles and roles, but he still lives in Royal Lodge, a 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park. He still has financial support from the family. He's exiled from public life, but he hasn't faced the legal system the way an ordinary person might. So what does accountability actually look like for someone born into extreme privilege? That's the uncomfortable question. And it's one that institutions everywhere, not just the monarchy, are wrestling with. Here's what's motivating about this, though. The fact that we're even asking these questions represents progress. 30 years ago, this story might have been buried. The victims might never have been heard. The prince might have continued as if nothing happened. The fact that there are consequences, even imperfect ones, shows that culture is changing. That voices that were once silenced are now being heard. That power is being questioned in ways it wasn't before. King Charles faces a delicate balancing act. On one hand, Andrew is his brother. On the other hand, every association with Andrew damages the crown. There are reports that Charles wants Andrew to move out of Royal Lodge and into a smaller property. It's symbolic, showing that Andrew's status really has changed, that there are ongoing consequences. But it's also about money. The monarchy is funded by British taxpayers through the sovereign grant, and there's increasing pressure to justify that expense. Having a disgraced prince living in a mansion doesn't help the optics. The broader question is whether the monarchy can survive in its current form. Australia, Jamaica, and other Commonwealth nations are having serious conversations about removing the British monarch as their head of state. In the UK itself, support for the monarchy fluctuates, often depending on who's in the spotlight. Prince William and Kate represent one vision: young, relatable, as relatable as royalty can be, focused on causes like mental health and early childhood development. They're trying to modernize the brand. But then there's Andrew, a reminder that the monarchy is still fundamentally about hereditary privilege, where accident of birth determines your status. Can both realities coexist? Can the monarchy be both ancient and modern, both privileged and accountable? These are the questions that will determine whether the institution survives another generation. And here's what's fascinating. The monarchy has survived before by adapting. They survived the abdication crisis in 1936. They survived Diana's death and the initial backlash in 1997. They've bent without breaking. Now, you might be thinking, this is interesting, but what does it have to do with my life? Here's what. Every organization, every family, every community eventually faces a moment where someone's behavior threatens the whole group. And you have to decide, do you protect the individual or do you protect the institution and its values? Maybe it's a family member who's done something harmful. Maybe it's a colleague whose behavior is creating a toxic workplace. Maybe it's a friend whose actions contradict everything your group stands for. The easy path is often to minimize it, to protect the person because of loyalty or love or shared history. But the right path is usually harder. It's about acknowledging harm, creating accountability, and showing that your values actually mean something. The monarchy's handling of Andrew isn't perfect, but it demonstrates something important. Even the most traditional institutions can change when they have to. Even families with centuries of history can say, this isn't acceptable. If they can do it, so can we. There's also a lesson here about redemption and consequences. Andrew lost his public role, but he's still part of his family. They still love him, presumably, even as they enforce boundaries about his public presence. That's a very human balance. You can hold someone accountable while still being connected to them. Consequences don't have to mean complete abandonment. And finally, there's a lesson about listening to voices that have been marginalized or silenced. The women who came forward about Epstein faced enormous pressure, public scrutiny, and skepticism. But they spoke anyway. And ultimately, they changed the conversation about power and abuse. That takes courage. And it reminds us that truth-telling, even when it's difficult, even when it's about powerful people, matters. Prince Andrew's fall from grace isn't just a royal scandal. It's a mirror reflecting how our society is changing, how we're redefining accountability, and how even the most protected institutions have to adapt or risk becoming irrelevant. The monarchy stands at a crossroads. Can it be both a link to tradition and a modern institution that reflects contemporary values? Can it honor its history while acknowledging when that history includes protecting the wrong people? Time will tell. But one thing is clear. The days of sweeping scandals under the rug are over. The days of because I said so and because that's how it's always been are ending. And that's true whether you're royalty or not. The question for all of us is, when we're tested, when someone in our circle causes harm, when our institutions fail, do we have the courage to demand better? Do we have the strength to say that no one is above accountability? That's the challenge Andrew's case presents. Not just for the monarchy, but for all of us.